Once upon a time, in the past, and in the days gone by, words cannot be spoken without remembering the merciful God, and peace be upon our Prophet Muhammad, the best of mankind. One sunny morning, Juha was walking on a dirt path leading to the village market. He appeared carrying 2 bags of dried dates and some old fabrics on his beautiful donkey, whose name was Yasser, intending to sell them. Juha was muttering to himself and laughing quietly as if Yasser was sharing the laughter with him. The road seemed lighter under the golden sun, while Juha pondered how to convince buyers to purchase his goods at a good price this time. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching quickly. He turned around to see a young man, no older than 17, riding a black horse, dressed in luxurious clothes and holding a sword, as if he had fled from somewhere. The young man was showing off his moves, waving his sword in the air and shouting, "I am stronger than all the men of the village, and braver than all the knights of the kingdom." Juha stopped, raised an eyebrow, and said, "It seems we have a competitor here, someone who rivals us in beauty and wit." The young man looked at Juha with disdain and asked, "Who are you, old man, accompanied by this thin creature?" Juha replied calmly, "I am Juha, and this is not a thin creature. It's Yasser, the most beautiful and intelligent donkey in the kingdom, smarter than most men who wave swords around." The young man laughed despite being unaccustomed to anyone responding to his bravado so casually. Soon, the young man became intrigued by Juha's wise and witty conversation. After a while, Juha invited the young man to rest under a tree and drink from his water pouch. The young man revealed his identity. He was Yasser, the son of the Sultan, who had fled the palace, tired of long lessons about accounting, history, and politics. Yasser said enthusiastically, "I want to live a real life, have adventures, and see the world with my own eyes, not through the palace windows." Juha looked at him slyly and said, "Well, my young lord, if you seek adventure, come with me to the market. But beware, the market is not a palace, and the people here do not care about your rank or title." Yasser hesitated for a moment, but eventually tied his horse to a tree and followed Juha on foot, proudly carrying his sword. Things took a funny turn at the market. Yasser tried to show off in front of the merchants, but his arrogant words only made one of them throw a smelly onion at him. Juha laughed while trying to calm things down, saying, "Don't bother him. He thinks he's still surrounded by palace treasures." Yasser felt embarrassed, but was more impressed by Juha's ability to turn awkward moments into jokes. By the end of their first day in the market, Yasser decided to stay with Juha for a few days to experience village life and learn from it. Juha welcomed the idea, but warned Yasser, "My young lord, life here is not like the palace. If you want to fit in, leave your sword and pride at the door." Yasser laughed, but didn't take Juha's words too seriously because he still believed. He was smarter than everyone else. The next day, they went to buy some barley from the farmers. Juha's donkey, Yasser, stood confidently, while Yasser tried to negotiate with the farmers using the same arrogant tone he used in the palace. "We only pay 1 dirham for such bad quality barley back home." The farmer glared at him angrily and said, "If you're in the palace now, you'll soon find your fancy clothes covered in dust." Yasser felt humiliated, but Juha intervened with a smile, saying, "Don't mind him, my friend. He thinks barley grows on trees." The farmer laughed and lowered the price slightly, but Yasser kept mumbling in anger. On the 3rd day, a bigger problem arose. While Juha was selling fabrics in the market, Yasser approached a vegetable seller and criticized his produce, comparing it to the elegant food served in the palace. The vendor lost his temper and shouted, "If you want elegance, then choose every leaf yourself and distribute it among the crowd." People gathered around, and a quarrel almost broke out. Juha rushed to the scene and grabbed Yasser's hand, telling the vendor, "Forgive him, Abu Ali. This young man loves your vegetables so much that he wants to learn the art of measurement from you." Juha slipped a dirham into the vendor's hand, calming the situation. However, Yasser felt frustrated again. That evening, under an olive tree, while Yasser chewed on some grass, Yasser spoke aloud. "Why don't these people respect me? I'm the Sultan's son." Juha patted Yasser's head and replied, "Wisdom doesn't come from arrogance, Yasser. Look at Yasser. He knows when to be silent and when to move. True intelligence lies in winning people's hearts, not forcing them to submit." Yasser fell silent, reflecting on Juha's words. For the first time, he realized there was a difference between boasting about intelligence and truly understanding it. The next day, Yasser insisted on leading Yasser himself to prove he could do anything. Due to his inexperience, however, he let the donkey sink into the mud. Juha sighed and said, "If you were wiser than Yasser, you would have chosen a safer path." Despite feeling frustrated, Yasser laughed, realizing that this simple lesson was something he hadn't learned in the palace. After several humorous adventures and problems that taught Yasser valuable lessons, news spread throughout the village that the Sultan's son was living with Juha. When the Sultan heard this, he grew worried and upset. How could his son, who was raised in the palace, live among peasants? He sent a royal messenger ordering Juha to bring the smartest man in the kingdom to the palace before sunset. Yasser approached Juha anxiously, asking, "What shall we do? The Sultan wants the smartest man in the kingdom." Instead of panicking, Juha reassured him, "Don't worry, my lord. Let's play along." Instead of taking Yasser to a philosopher or scholar, Juha visited Abu Salam, an old shepherd known for his simplicity and profound wisdom. Juha invited Abu Salam to the palace, saying, "Abu Salam, you're wiser than all the palace scholars. You know how to keep your sheep happy and understand nature's rhythms." Abu Salam laughed and agreed to go, though he didn't fully grasp what was happening. On their way to the palace, Yasser grew nervous. "How will we convince my father that this shepherd is the smartest man?" he asked. Juha replied, tapping Yasser, "Intelligence isn't found in books, Yasser. It's in understanding life. Leave it to me." When they arrived at the Sultan's court, the advisors looked at Abu Salam in disbelief. "Is this really the smartest man in the kingdom?" Juha stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, Abu Salam knows how to lead 100 sheep in the mountains without losing one. He knows when it will rain and when the land will dry up. And he knows how to make people laugh even on the hardest days. Isn't that wisdom?" Then Juha turned to Abu Salam, saying, "Go ahead, my friend. Tell the Sultan about the secret of your sheep." Abu Salam began recounting simple stories filled with wisdom drawn from nature and human experiences. The Sultan couldn't help but laugh and realized that Juha had transformed a humble lesson into a demonstration of true wisdom. However, the Sultan wasn't satisfied yet. The next day, he issued another challenge. "Build me a bridge made of air." This time, Yasser panicked, but Juha laughed and said, "A bridge of air? That's easy." Juha took Yasser to the riverbank and constructed an imaginary bridge using a rope stretched between two trees. When the Sultan heard the answer, he burst out laughing, but acknowledged that Juha had taught his son something he couldn't learn in the palace: cleverness and the ability to turn the impossible into possible with intelligence. Yasser started, seeing that true greatness doesn't come from strength or titles but from understanding people and adapting to situations. Still, he retained a hint of royal pride. Together, they continued living relatively relaxed lives, wandering through the village and interacting with its people, with Yasser following them like a loyal shadow. However, their peaceful days didn't last long. One night, while Juha, Yasser, and Yasser sat by a small fire outside, Juha heard heavy footsteps approaching. Suddenly, 3 masked men armed with swords and ropes appeared. They were followers of a corrupt merchant named Ziad, who coveted the throne and saw Yasser's absence from the palace as an opportunity. One of the men said gruffly, "You're coming with us, Prince." Yasser tried to defend himself with his sword, but was no match for the experienced men, who quickly overpowered him, tied him up, and dragged him away. Juha stood frozen for a moment, but quickly regained composure. Looking at Yasser, he said, "It seems we're going on a real adventure." This time, Juha carefully tracked the kidnappers' trail, using his keen observation skills to follow broken branches and overturned stones. Eventually, he traced them to a hideout in a nearby forest where he heard Yasser arguing with his captors. One of the men mocked Yasser, saying, "Your father will destroy us if he finds out." Another laughed, adding, "We'll demand a huge ransom from the Sultan." Juha thought for a moment. Facing armed men directly wouldn't work, so he remembered something Abu Salem once told him. "Fear is stronger than the sword if you know how to use it." Juha lit a small fire far from the hideout and began making strange noises. Yasser brayed loudly, as if part of a magical ritual. Then Juha shouted dramatically, "Oh, spirits! Turn these evildoers into donkeys!" He threw twigs into the fire, creating eerie sounds. Hearing this, the kidnappers panicked. In those days, people believed in magic and supernatural powers, and these men were no exception. Whispering nervously, one of them said, "This must be Juha's doing. He can transform people into animals!" Seizing the moment, Juha emerged from behind the trees, holding a stick and chanting meaningless words. Terrified, the men dropped their swords and fled into the forest, leaving Yasser tied to a tree. Juha untied him, and Yasser, trembling with fear and amazement, asked, "How did you do that?" Juha laughed and replied, "True magic, my young lord, is making people afraid of their own imagination." They rode Yasser back to the village, and Yasser looked at Juha with a mix of gratitude and admiration. For the first time, he realized that this seemingly ordinary man was not just wise, but also brave and loyal, qualities he hadn't seen in the palace guards. The incident didn't go unnoticed by the Sultan, who, upon hearing about it, understood that Juha wasn't merely a funny man, but someone worthy of respect. Soon after rescuing Yasser, it became clear that their adventure together was coming to an end. The Sultan sent soldiers to escort Yasser back to the palace. As they prepared to leave, Juha knew this moment would come. Yasser brayed joyfully, sharing in the bittersweet farewell. When they reached the palace, the Sultan greeted them with mixed emotions. Though relieved to have his son back safely, he was curious to learn how Juha managed to surpass the sophistication of the palace. Standing before the throne in his modest attire, Juha smiled as Yasser chewed on some straw outside, indifferent to the grandeur. The Sultan asked Yasser to recount his adventures, and Yasser told him everything: the mistakes he made in the market, the humility lessons from Juha, and the challenges they faced together. Listening intently, the Sultan turned to Juha and asked, "How can a simple man like you achieve all this?" Juha replied, "Your Majesty, greatness doesn't come from fine clothes or lofty palaces. It comes from a heart that sees people clearly and a mind that finds solutions where others see impossibilities." With a playful tone, he added, "And of course, Yasser deserves some credit." The Sultan laughed, a rare occurrence, and realized that this humble man had taught his son invaluable lessons. Yasser stepped forward and said, "Father, I want Juha to become my personal advisor. He has taught me that true intelligence lies in understanding people deeply, and that courage means valuing friends in times of hardship." The Sultan agreed wholeheartedly, not just because Juha saved Yasser, but because he transformed his son's perspective on life. From that day on, Juha became a permanent guest in the palace, bringing Yasser along and sharing stories full of wisdom and laughter. One evening, as everyone gathered in the palace, the Sultan asked Juha to share one last joke summarizing their adventure. Juha stood up, looked at Yasser and said, "Once, Yasser and I were walking on a road. Yasser asked me, 'Juha, How can I become wise? I replied, listen to your mistakes and learn from them. Then I added, even burning a train ticket is better than being a spoiled prince. Everyone laughed, realizing that this joke wasn't just humor. It was a profound lesson encapsulating everything Yasser had learned from Juha. Living humbly, embracing mistakes, and respecting others were the greatest teachings of all, and so we reach the end of today's story. We hope you enjoyed it and that it added some joy to your wonderful day. If you liked the story, don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel and encouraging us to present more captivating tales. Don't forget to activate the bell icon to stay updated with our thrilling adventures and stories. We want to hear from you. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment below with your name and country, and we'll send you a special shout-out in our next video. Join our growing family from around the world and become part of Tales from the East. Your name could be heard in the next magical tale, so don't be shy. Write your name and where you're from, and let the world know you're listening.